Hi, I'm Debbie Brown, and I'm going to show you how to quilt clam shells on a crate quilt. I'm demonstrating on crate quilts various machine quilting techniques so that you can practice your machine quilting on a small project that will help keep a shelter animal warm. A crate quilt is 14 by 20 inches, and I'm making it very simply out of 2.5-inch squares, 7 across, 10 down. I'm making a lot of these out of my scraps, but for the video I'm making them in 2 tones of gray so that the quilting will show up on camera. The thread I'm using today is Fabulux Majestic Sunrise. It's a combination of red, orange, and yellow, and it makes a beautiful impact on the quilt. I'm not using it in the bobbin. I'm using a matching color of Deco Bob, which is an 80 weight polyester thread. The bobbin is going to contain so much more thread that I don't have to worry about changing my bobbin while I'm quilting such a small project. I've prepared my quilt sandwich with cotton fabric on the back, Quilter's Dream green batting for the batting, and if you look closely you'll see I've actually stitched it together. I'm sewing my scraps together for this project. I don't think the shelter animals will mind. I've put the top layer on, and I have used 1/4 inch masking tape around the edges of the quilt. This is so that when I'm quilting my pumpkin seeds, I'm not going to stitch them into the binding area and bind off the edges. Now the shelter animals will probably not mind if I have a pumpkin seed cut off here and there, but it's good practice to do. I use masking tape, the 1/4 inch masking tape, on the edge of many of my quilts just to remind me not to stitch into that binding area so that my design doesn't get cut off. I'm using the Handy Quilter multi-clam shell ruler to make my pumpkin seeds. I'm going to use the 4-inch half circle, and I'm going to place that right next to the foot of my sewing machine. Now I stitch on a Handy Quilter Stitch 710 machine, and it uses 1/4 inch templates. I also have a ruler foot attached to this machine. Before you stitch on your home sewing machine with a ruler, check with the manufacturer to make sure that you have the proper ruler foot, and also to make sure that you're using the right height of rulers. There are different heights of rulers for different types of machines. It's important to make sure you have all of the right parts so that you won't damage your sewing machine. My ruler foot is on my machine, my feed dogs are down, and I'm ready to quilt. I'm going to start by putting my bands on and make a knot in the top corner of the quilt, which is needle down, needle up, pull up the bobbin thread, tug it tight, and take a couple small stitches right there. That'll secure it. It's actually 1 stitch into the binding area, so when I bind it, it will hold. I'm now taking my 4-inch half circle from my multi-clamshell tool. I don't know if you've noticed, but I have ruler grip on this ruler, and that is making it so much easier for me to push the fabric with the ruler. If I didn't have the ruler grip on, I would try to push the fabric and the ruler and the fabric would be moving in different places, and I'd be chasing the ruler with the foot of my machine, and my quilting wouldn't look precise. And precision is the reason I'm using a ruler in the first place. So ruler grip side down. Now this ruler has a mark for the half circle. I'm placing that right on the edge of the masking tape, which would be a seam line, and I'm placing the 1/4 circle mark on a seam line. I'm setting my machine rather slow so that I can worry more about holding the ruler, pushing the fabric, than the machine going too fast. I'm going to put my foot pedal all the way to the ground, using it as an on-off button, and I'm going to stitch to the top of the half circle, and then if I need to rest, blink, breathe, if you hold your breath while you quilt, I will have time to do that, and it's also time to reposition my ruler if my piecing is a little off or the ruler slid a little bit. There, I've stitched the first half. I'm going to speed the machine up just a little bit. And the reason I'm doing that is because, to me, my stitches look a little large. If the machine goes a little bit faster, the stitches will get a little smaller. Quarter circle, half circle, and continue. And now I'm going to make a small knot at the end by taking a couple of stitches, bringing my needle up, bringing my foot up, pulling the quilt 8 to 10 inches away. That's going to give me a long top thread and a long bobbin thread underneath. It's there even though I can't see it. I'm going to pull the top thread out of the way, bring the needle right back to the hole, foot down, needle up, and that pulls up my bobbin thread so I can trim it from the top. Now on a small dog bed or a crate quilt like this, it's very easy to trim the front, turn it over, trim the back, but I like to practice this knot so when I'm doing a larger quilt, I don't have to unwind a king size quilt that is very carefully contained in here just to cut my thread. So I'm going to go back up to the top, and instead of starting at the bottom of that clamshell like I did last time, I'm going to start at the top and just make half of a clamshell. And that's going to give me the offset clamshell look I'm going for. So needle down, needle up, pull up the bobbin thread, take a couple of small stitches, and I'm going to line the center line of the clamshell, or the quarter circle, up along the masking tape, and the half circle line on the seam line. So I'm going to stitch half of a clamshell, stop in the corner, pick it up, and continue stitching like this, clamshells down each row, offsetting every other row until the entire quilt is covered. I'll be back when I've finished. I've now finished stitching the first half of the pumpkin seed, which looks a lot like a clamshell that we've done before, or exactly like a clamshell we've done before. Now I'm going to stitch clamshells over top of clamshells, but first I'm going to turn my entire project upside down. This clamshell here is a whole clamshell, but on top of it I'm going to stitch a half of a clamshell and a half of a clamshell. Start off with my knot. And instead of making a whole clamshell over the first 2 squares, I'm going to make a half a clamshell over the first square only. So I've lined up my half circle line on the tape as well as my quarter circle line on the tape. And I'm going to stitch 1/2 of a clamshell. And now I'm going to stitch a whole clamshell over top. Adjusting if necessary halfway through. So as I'm stitching this, I'm seeing that little petals are forming where the half circles cross. make a knot. So I have my first row of upside down clamshells, which made petals going all the way down, or pumpkin seeds. I'm going to continue stitching every row on the rest of my dog crate, and I'll be back when I'm finished. Now that I've finished stitching clamshells in both directions, my quilt is covered with beautiful pumpkin seeds. As you saw, I used the seam lines to know where to position each of the clamshells. But if you have a plain fabric that doesn't have any seams on it, you can draw in a grid like this. It's not only for checkerboard quilts. You're able to do this on any quilt as long as you're positioning the clamshells so that they'll match up. Now that I'm finished, I'm ready to peel off all the masking tape and then bind my quilt and send it off to the dog shelter. For more quilty goodness, visit DebbieBrownQuilts.com and sign up for my newsletter. While you're there, you can also purchase supplies that were used in today's tutorial. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos. Thanks for visiting with me today. Happy quilting!